Over the last week, we've shared a couple of thoughts from Henry Nouwen's book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, in which he reflects on a famous painting by the artist Rembrandt, depicting one of Jesus' most famous parables about two sons who, in very different ways, return to their father's house. We've talked about how Nouwen recognises himself in each of the two sons, but today we'll be talking about the third character in the story, the father who welcomes them home. There's so much we could talk about here. There's so much to recognise about the father's welcome of his sons. But we'll skip to what is perhaps the most interesting part of the painting, the father's hands. If we look closely, the two hands are actually incredibly different. The father's left hand touching the son's shoulder is strong and muscular. The fingers are spread out and cover a large part of the son's shoulder and back. There's a certain pressure, particularly around the thumb, where the hands seem not only to touch, but with a real strength hold the son. There's a firmness to the father's grip as he clutches his son tighter and tighter and tighter into his chest. However, his right hand is completely different. This hand is softer and tender. The fingers are close together and have a certain elegance about them. The hand lies gently on the son's shoulder, as if to caress, to stroke, to offer consolation and support. It actually looks more like the hand of a mother. Rembrandt has actually captured a real nuance here of how the Bible describes God's love. God is guardian and he is defender, but he's also comforter and consoler. God's love is reflected in the love of a mother as well as the love of a father. The prophet Isaiah writes in the Old Testament, "Can a woman forget her baby at the breast? Feel no pity for the child she has borne. Even if these were to forget, I shall not forget you. Look, I have engraved you on the palm of my hands." When we find ourselves at our most vulnerable, God is the one who both gently cares for us and holds us tightly in his strength. In the hands embracing the prodigal son, we see both the protection of a father and the gentle care of a mother. The final thing to notice in this painting is the final destination of the journey that it takes us on. We can recognize ourselves in both of the sons returning home, but we're also pointed to our own transformation in becoming the father ourselves. Now, again, we might not think of this painting or this parable about a story about becoming the father. Surely this is a story about the sinful son receiving the father's grace. This is a story about receiving God's goodness, receiving his forgiveness. And that's true. It most definitely is. But part of the significance of being a son or daughter is that we someday transition into being the parent. The significance of the father making his sons his heirs is that one day they will step into their inheritance. We mature. Jesus' message to his disciples is to be compassionate as your Father is compassionate. Be merciful as your Father is merciful. The life of a disciple of Jesus doesn't stop at being welcomed back into the Father's house, but we are then called to play a part in welcoming others back home as well. to live lives of compassion and mercy that reflect the glory of the Father's own compassion and mercy. Follow the family resemblance is the message. This is something of what the Apostle Paul means when he writes, "If we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory." Rembrandt's own self-portraits towards the end of his life tell a story of no longer seeing the world with eyes attracted to material things that he spent most of his youth chasing after, but things of deeper internal value, mainly love. As his own eyes began to fade, he started painting blind people as the ones who could truly see. He returned a few times to figures like the blind Tobit or Simeon holding the infant Jesus. His art was no longer trying to grasp, conquer, and regulate the visible, but to transform the visible in the fire of love. These are the eyes that Rembrandt paints the Father with, and these are the eyes which we are called to mature into. Looking at the world not with greed or lust, not with jealousy or with bitterness, but with patient love, calling and waiting for God's lost children to return home into the celebration of the Father's house.